Hello, in this video we're going to be looking at how to make a game board. So the first thing I just want to do is just point out this is for my Holodomor simulation. And one thing that we need to keep in mind is the size of the board. So let's go to design. You can do slide size. I have a custom slide. And this is an 18 width by 12 height. That's a size I like. I think it's a good one for several people to be using at once. You can go bigger or smaller, but you got to remember it depends on what size of paper they can print out on, and at the print shop or wherever you're having it printed. And that's something you got to keep in mind, right? Like if you print out something, you might as well use the whole paper. So you want to get an idea of how big it is, and you want to make it that size. But that's the size we're using here. This is 12 by 18. And I want to go through and just talk a little bit about the logic of it first. So we've got back here, we've got a background that, remember, this is a Ukrainian painting of peasants farming. The Holodomor is looking at this famine in Ukraine. And so I thought that that was kind of a nice contrast. Here you've got these peasants who are doing very well, harvesting their grain, and then you're going through this period of famine when you would have remembered the good harvest, but now you're suffering. So that's kind of logic there. So that's the first thing we need to kind of do is look at how you can add a background. All right, so I'm going to kind of go back and forth between here. So do the background. We go to Format Background, and you can see you can do a solid fill, and we could actually do a color, right? And one thing I want to point out, let's see, I'll hit Control Z to undo that. We can, like I selected this one, and I can also just fill that, right? Like I could just fill like a box. But if you click out here, it's going to fill everything. Now, what I did was I did a picture fill. Right? So let's, just to make things simple, I'm just going to delete these boxes here. I don't need them, and they're going to make it difficult to do this. But okay, so we can do a picture fill, and I'm going to then click, it does this automatically, I'm not sure why. I'll click on File, and then it's going to not take me to where I was earlier. That's all right. That's why I have it organized, right? So I know if I go to the board, there we will find what I'm looking for. I'll select the image, and there it is. And one thing I like about that, this is a public domain image by a Ukrainian, I think it's a Ukrainian artist. It's in Ukraine. I can't remember if the artist is Russian or Ukrainian. In any case, it's a beautiful painting. I think it looks really professional. I think it looks really good. And it's public domain, so there's no problem with me using it. And then to get the titles, let's just for let's try and do this top title. So we go to Insert, and then Text Box. Horizontal text box. And I'm not going to worry about making everything perfect. I just want to show you how to do it. So you just make your box, and then I can type in there. Now it's going to let me format if I want. I'm not going to worry about that just yet, so I'll exit out of there. There we go. And it's going to make it automatically small because I have a small font. Let's just type it in. Can you survive the Holodomor? And then I'm going to highlight it. Oops. Click the wrong thing. There we go. I'm going to highlight it, and then you can set your size if you want, but if you press this arrow button, it's going to make it the next size up. And what's neat is it's going to do that. It'll keep it consistent. So if you have like 18-point font text and 12-point font text selected, it won't make them the same size. It'll keep them. It'll make them bigger, but they'll still say relatively the same size as they were to each other, and that's nice. So I've got that. Can you cite the Holodomor? But let's say you'll notice here I have it in white. So we can choose that, and we can make the color white. Okay, there it is. There's the color, and we'll make it white. And then you can click on this to kind of give it that little shadow thing to make it stand out a little bit more. So you can see there's that, and then I can change the font too if I want. You have lots of options there, and you can narrow it down. If you make it smaller, it will kind of automatically go down a bit if you want to do that. Do all sorts of things that way. So that's nice. So we got a sense of how to do that. Now, let's go here and let's try and make one of these boxes. So insert, and we want to insert a shape. I'm always a little slow on these things. There we are, shapes. So I want a rectangle. And again, there we go. So automatically comes out like blue, and that's fine. You can do that. If you want it to have a different color, you can do different colors up here, like that. And we can do shape. We can do no fill, and it's not going to fill. And also what you can do, right? Notice that the outline here is very thin, and that's fine. You can leave it thin if you want, but I think that's going to be a little hard for people to see. You can see here it's a little bit thicker. It's going to be possible for them to see. So you right click and you go down to Format Shape. Here we are. Line. So you can do no line, then it'll go away. You can do solid line, you can do gradient line. Lots of different things you can do. You can play with the transparency. I'm going to play with the width. So each time I click this, do you notice it gets a little bit darker? Right, and I like it at 3 point. All right, so you can go there, and now you've got this line, and then you can insert the text box there. And then I want to make it a little bit bigger. Oops, notice I didn't get the H in there. Hard to see. Let's see. So let's change it to white to make it a little bit easier to see. It was at 48. And I misspelled it because I couldn't see. There we are. And of course, that's where having that little shadow thing can help a little bit more. So there you go. So very similar. Now, one thing I want to point out, I don't have numbers in there because that's where counters would go. There's not really that much wealth available, so I'll supply people with wealth counters. They'll put the wealth counters down there. And using that same principle, we can do hidden food and so on and so forth. What I've done here, so there is, they won't use a counter. Remember, counters count, so you count the number of counters. So if there's 4 counters here, you have 4 of those. Here they have a marker where they mark a number, and that's because it's a higher number. You can go, the lowest you can have is 4, highest is 14. It says economic contribution males. So this is a simulation where each team is a partner, and one plays the father slash husband, the other plays the wife slash mother, and they're taking care of their kids. And basically, the father rolls for himself and Igor, the mother rolls for herself and Sophia, and that's how that works. So that's why it's written like that. But I have the numbers in one color, black, and then the written part in white, like the letters, just to make it a little bit, add some nice contrast there. And I could have made these like solid. I opted not to because I just did not, because I just like the painting and I want people to be able to see the painting. So this is pretty simple to make. Again, it's just the same kind of thing. We just do another horizontal text box. This will make the line again 3-point width. We've got that. And then all I do now is I can just type the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. And then I'm not going to write, I don't have to write all that down. Just write some filler text. And then again, you can just play around with this to see what you like. Like I said, I want to keep them, I want to make them all kind of have that shadow effect, make it a little bit easier to see. Notice it's going to get bigger as I make it bigger. I can stretch out if I want. And then I can make this white to be consistent. And so you can see how you do this, right? It's pretty simple stuff. but it allows the people participating in the simulation to more easily keep track of things. I used to have people like write on a piece of paper, and that's really hard to visualize. Here, it's a little bit easier to make track of, to keep track of. And you notice these characters, they have economic contribution, and if one of them should die, you know, your economic contribution is like 14, but if he dies, it goes down to 12, for example, because the head of the family contributes 10. So that hopefully keeps things fairly simple. Now, one other thing to just think about when you do board design. So sometimes you want to have a random event. Remember, in the cards, there was a chance that someone could get sick. There's a chance someone could lose their health. Um, so wealth is a family resource. Everyone has wealth, but health belongs to an individual. So if someone gets sick and loses their health, um, you have to take it away from them. And so on these, here it says 4 health, so they would have 4 health counters. And if they run out of health counters, they die. And if they die, their economic contribution goes away. But the question is, whose health do you lose? If I was to try and write that on a card, the card is very small. To make it random, it can be very difficult. So I just added this space on the board that says, when asked to randomly select a character, roll a d6 to do so. If that character is dead or not part of the simulation, roll again. So you would roll d6, and it's like, okay, I drew a card that says I lost a health. Oh, I rolled a 3. Igor loses a health. Oh, I rolled a 6, but there's no Katerina. She's there because if I have an odd group, right? Let's say I have a class of 21. So I have it set up so that someone plays the grandma, and that's Katerina. And so I would just say, well, your group doesn't have a Katerina. You just roll again. And the key thing is you want the rules, they're easily accessible to the participants. And that's the purpose of that. And it's hard if I try and put that on a card, I'd have to have it at like 8-point font. So that's why one purpose of having a board is that you have the rules there for easy access. You have easy ways to keep track of things. Now, the last thing, though, is you notice I have these cards here. Now, I told you how to make those individual cards. Those are ones that the participants play. These are their kids. They're the ones that they're taking care of. They're kind of non-player characters, if you're familiar with that language. So no one is actually these people. So I put them on the board, right? And if they die, I'll cover them with like a skull card. Um, but let's talk about how to make those. So basically, I had told you earlier how to make cards, right? And those are some of the cards I made. It's really easy. So you would make a card, just like what we did before. You can see the design's a little bit different so people don't get confused. But excuse me, you would just drag and drop it, and there you go. And the nice thing is that it keeps its size. So you notice I have the ruler here. This keeps its size. It was made at 3.5 by 2.5 inches. It's going to stay 3.5 by 2.5 inches. And so what you could do then is, if you want, you could drop like or you can make like just one that's just a basic color and then make it the same size of a card if you want a place where students and actually put their cards on the board. And we sometimes do that with the activities. So that's something to kind of keep in mind when it comes to board design. And one thing I just want to point out, so let's kind of do that actually while we're here. Even though this doesn't have, I've shown you how to make all the elements on this board, but let's say I want to make a place where someone could put a card. So let's make another square, and I can kind of just put that over this so I can get the size right. It's not quite right. I can stretch it out. There we go. So it's about the same size, and now I've got it. And so the idea of doing this is if you want to have it so someone can, they know where to put a card, like if you're doing an activity that's matching. So, put the card that represents a Bina here, put the card that represents this here. That's how you do it. And then you can make sure it's the right size. You know it's going to fit, right? Because it fits nicely over that. And you could put text on top of it. So we've got that there. Now, one thing I just want to point out, sometimes you may move stuff around and something may disappear. So if that happens, if you right click, you can do bring to front. And what that did is I right clicked the square rectangle and brought it to front. So that covered then the text. If I now say send to back, we can see the text again. If I right click the text and put send to back, can't see it anymore. I can put this, though now I'll send it to back and I can see it. So I like PowerPoint. I think PowerPoint's a powerful tool that lets even an amateur person like me with no art skills to make a board that I think looks pretty professional. I think it looks good. Um, I think it immerses people in the simulation, and it makes the rules clear, and it makes record keeping easy. You just if you just give people what I found from my experience, is if you just give people a piece of paper and say write stuff down, it's just not very interesting, and they don't like it because it's math. No offense to math, I think math is awesome. I like crunchy things. Um, that is, crunchy is a slang that means when you have a lot of math in a simulation. But a lot of people kind of struggle with it. It makes it hard to visualize. So this is the way to do it. So hopefully this helps you as you make boards.